Well, Jesus wants to show them he's not a ghost, right? That he is risen from the dead in full bodily form, right? A ghost doesn't have a digestive system, right? He proves that it's really him. You're not seeing hallucinations. I'm going to eat this piece of fish just to make you understand it's really me. And touch me. I got these wounds. And so he wants to impress upon them that it is a bodily resurrection. But before I go into the rest of the readings, I want to start out with something that happened to me just this Thursday and Friday. Father Brian had mentioned to you back in November how going to a Ben Rector concert was a bucket list item for him last year that he was delighted to have experienced. Well, as you know, I love golf, and I was delighted to check off a bucket list just this past Thursday and Friday. On Wednesday evening, I arrived at Augusta, Georgia, and I got to experience the Masters. And on the flight over there, I actually ran into two fellow Jacksonians, Bart Hawley and his son Andy. But I joined some friends over there who rented a house about 20 minutes drive from Augusta National. And just walking on that course onto the grounds, right? As they show on TV, the grounds were just spectacular and pristine with every detail attended to. And the course is actually even more majestic than what we see on TV because a two-dimensional screen simply can't capture how hilly the landscape is. My feet, man, after walking over 21,000 steps in one day, right? This is nearly 10 miles on that first day. Those puppies were barking. I mean, whew. But on Thursday morning, I was just determined to walk the entire course from number 1 to number 18 sequentially, following 3 groups in particular play those holes. The first group I was following had the defending Masters champion, Jon Rahm, who had won last year with a nice touch at the end of the trophy presentation. He wished everybody happy Easter and then did a sign of the cross and pointed up to the skies, to the heavens. The group after them, after Jon Rahm's group, had both Rory McIlroy and Scottie Scheffler, who won it the year before Jon Rahm in 2022. And Scottie, having won back-to-back tournaments recently, nearly a third in a row, is the clear odds-on favorite to win this year, even before he got the lead yesterday. But the reason why, the solo lead, I should say. But the reason why I bring up the Masters is because I want to focus on some comments that Scottie made at the Masters press conference. He's become a crowd favorite because he's such a modest guy, humble guy, ordinary guy for being the #1 golfer in the world, right? And so the reporter asked, the reporter was talking to his dad, and his dad was saying that he's just so glad Scottie's a good person. And he said, that's kind of what I really wanted out of our relationship. And so the reporter was like, I'm kind of curious if you could share what lessons did he impart when you were a kid to make sure that you weren't, a jerk. That's what the reporter said, that you weren't dismissive of people. I think that's a pretty fair assessment of how you treat others. And Scottie replied, well, I think, my dad never looked at me as a golfer. He never pushed me to become a good golfer. That was never what he wanted for me. I think playing junior golf, sometimes you see a lot of parents who really want their kid to be really, really good at something, and they think that that's going to bring them joy. But becoming a really good golfer may bring you a little bit of momentary joy, but it doesn't sustain it for very long. Winning a tournament makes me happy for about 5 minutes. And so the reporter says, well, where does it fit in? How does golf fit in defining you as a person right now? And Scottie said, I'm hoping it doesn't define me too much because I feel like, and I say this a bunch, golf's something that I do. Yeah, it's a huge part of my life, but it doesn't define me as a person. It's just something I do, and I happen to be good at it some weeks. And so the reporter followed up that question and said, what do you think defines you? And Scottie jokingly says, ask my wife. But then he says simply, I'm a faithful guy. I believe in a creator. I believe in Jesus. Ultimately, that's what defines me the most. And then he wraps it up pretty plainly. Yeah, I feel like I've been given a platform to compete and show my talent, but I think what defines me most is my faith. I've been called to come out here, do my best, and glorify God. And that's pretty much it, right? Been called to glorify God, that's pretty much it. So Scotty seems to have his priorities in order, right? In fact, one of the questions he was asked the last couple of days, because his wife Meredith is due to give birth to a child soon. And so he was asked, in the event that you have the lead on Sunday, which he does, but your wife was ready to give birth, would you leave? And a couple of days ago, he said, I'm ready at any moment's notice. And people couldn't believe it, so they kept on asking. And then he said, right after his great round on Saturday, he said, and gaining the outright lead, he said, right now, the most exciting thing for us is not winning the Masters. It's a baby coming pretty soon. So what if you were the number one golfer in the world? With all the eyes of the golfing world upon you this week in its most prestigious tournament, and you were asked, what do you think defines you? Do you have an answer to that question? What do you think defines you? Would you be in your relationship with God? Would you be able to say something like Scotty said, I believe in Jesus. Ultimately, I think that's what defines me most. I've been called to glorify God, and that's pretty much it. Pretty plain and simple answer, right? Is God just one thing in your life among many other things like family and work and hobbies and sports and clubs, etc.? And all of those things together define you? Or are all those things like family, career, hobbies, sports, all ordered towards the one and only thing we're called to do for all eternity? And that's to glorify God. The answer to that question is huge, right? And the implications are huge. If God is one among many things in your life, even if he's the most important of those things, or if he's the one and only thing, and all of your other loves are ordered towards that one love. Those two different options live to totally different lives. What path are you going down? One leads to a life of fragmentation, being pulled in all kinds of different directions and feeling conflicted because of the competing loyalties in my life. The other leads towards a life of integrity and wholeness and a simplicity that leads to peace, because everything is ordered to one thing: loving and glorifying God. There are no competing loyalties, so that we love everything else in our life in light of that one love of God. I mean, do you see the wisdom then of the greatest commandment? Love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Doesn't leave much for anything else, does it? Because life is an eternal love affair with God, who is madly in love with humanity and madly in love with you specifically. Remember, God is omnipotent. He's all powerful, so he can love each of us personally with an intensity as if we were his only love. So God is madly in love with you, but love takes two to tango. Are you madly in love with God? So that everything you in your world, everything in his beautiful creation, and everything good, true, and beautiful in your life is an expression of his love for you. I mean, think about ladies, the married ladies, if you have a diamond ring on your finger, what if that wasn't given to you by your spouse? It was just a pretty rock on your finger. Yeah, it's pretty, it's beautiful, it's expensive, but it wasn't given to you out of love. It was just something you possess, maybe a personal item or a personal purchase. Yeah, it's nice, but it becomes priceless when it becomes a pledge of your significant other's undying love for you, doesn't it? takes a totally different significance when you know that this is a gift symbolizing the undying love God or your spouse has for you. Everything else in creation, we should see in that light. Yeah, there's a lot of good things around us, but do we recognize that it is expression of God's love for us, his mad love for us, right? The love from your spouse, the love you have for your children, the awe you have from the natural wonders of this world, the majesty of the masters, right? The satisfaction of achieving excellence in any given field, the thrill of sports or whatever your hobbies are, or the delight of things as simple as good food and drink. As the prophet Isaiah says, juicy, rich food and pure, choice wines. All of it is meant to be ordered to this eternal love affair with God, who's the source of all of it and has given it to us. Now, loving and glorifying God this leading to a life of peace doesn't mean it can't be hard and difficult, right? They're not mutually exclusive things. Peace in our life and difficult things are not mutually exclusive. In fact, in this world, this fallen world, this side of reality, the most profound love always entails sacrifice and suffering, because it entails a dying to self, right? Just look at the symbol of our faith, right? The most profound act of love. But even in that, in our suffering, in our sacrifice, the saints can attest there can be a bitter sweetness in that suffering because we're uniting ourselves more closely with our beloved. I mean, look at the difference it made in the lives of Peter and the apostles. You notice a difference in their lives pre-resurrection and post-resurrection, right? Pre-resurrection, Peter denied Jesus 3 times. He was not only defined by his relationship with Jesus, but he was also defined by his fears. Judas was not only defined by his relationship with Jesus, but also with his attachment to worldly things and ambitions. Jesus was not the Messiah he was envisioning. Can we relate to Peter? Do we ever let our fears define us and drive us and our actions and our daily lives? I know I can at times. That's why prayer is a must. Prayer is a must for a daily thing so that we can surrender our fears. That's why Jesus said, do not be afraid. And then focus on him being the solitary love of our life. That's a daily yes that's needed to release the power of the resurrection in our daily life. Can we relate to Judas, with Judas, right? Do we ever try to mold our relationship with Jesus and try to make him out as something he's not? Something that we want to be malleable to our own image and likeness. Something that goes along with my desires, my schedule, my wants. These hang-ups that come from having competing loyalties where God is only one of many things in our life that drive and define us, that led Peter and Judas down dark paths. But Peter shows us that those bad choices don't have to determine us, that God invites us to repentance and healing and salvation, which as we've been seeing in Acts, it frees us to do great things that give God glory and help lead others to their own redemption. And that was made possible by the resurrection and Pentecost with the gift of the Holy Spirit. Peter no longer had competing loyalties in his life. And so in one pre-resurrection, he was scared to even admit he knew Jesus to a servant girl, to now confronting the powers of the world boldly and courageously professing the good news of Jesus Christ. Because his solitary love of God, his love of God was now solitary. And it freed him to serve his neighbor and to glorify God. And when we don't have competing loyalties, we're less likely to fall in the trap of following a false god of our own making, which is what the second reading warns us about, right? As the second reading reminds us, quote, "The way we can be sure that we know Jesus is to keep his commandments. Those who say, 'I know him,' but do not keep his commandments are liars, and the truth is not in them." So we can be tempted, right? I'm tempted. We can be tempted to fashion Jesus in our own likeness and image, so that living out the gospel doesn't have to make any demands upon us. But when we do that, we make ourselves out to be God, not Jesus. I mean, we can do that in our relationships, right? Live it in a way that it doesn't make demands upon us, but then it becomes a lifeless relationship. So John reminds us of the other side of that, the good news. He says, "But whoever keeps God's word, the love of God is truly perfected in him." Does that intrigue you? Does that make you desirous that God's love is perfected in you? Or do we kind of shy away from it? Because, you know what, I don't want to go all in. But then we have all these competing loyalties and a fragmented life. Now, the one thing I want to say, that one final thing about what I really enjoyed about the Master's experience, there's a very strict rule in the Master's. There are no cell phones allowed on the premises, right? When you get to the gates, there's these metal detectors, and you have to empty out your pockets. If you look suspicious like me, you get wanded and questioned, right? They even have these canine units and FBI agents around. And there was a little inside joke, because out of our entire group, the canine just approached me and sniffed me out, right? But anyway, it's one of those few places in the world where 40,000 people are gathered in one place each day, and no one has a cell phone. If you need to get a hold of someone, there are a couple of areas with rows of courtesy phone booths, so you can call your ride or whatever. But this Catholic doctor that I met at the airport, whose clients are professional golfers, he and I were talking. Because we got used to not having phones, and we were actually interacting with other people. Wow. But we were just marveling about, like, he said it was like a little bit of heaven on earth. Like, everyone was present, smiling, interacting with others, living in the moment, as opposed to like with shoulders down and just going like this. Everybody was like interacting with what's going on the course and one another. But we just as a little thing about what does it look like to have God define us. It means living out our daily lives in light of that. And so one of the things that can either serve that or enslave us in the opposite way is our interaction with our devices, right? And so perhaps maybe make some rules, like no phones at the dinner table, or keeping phones from the bedroom after a specific time. You know, lock them up while they're charging, and don't pick them up until after your morning prayers, so that you're discerning God's will and envisioning your day joyfully fulfilling that will that God has for you that day, right? Allow God to define you, not the world to define you by you being a reactive robot, but proactively shape it through your prayer life of envisioning what life would look like that day if you were to live out God's will for your and purpose for your life. And so I just end with that. What defines you? Because God awaits your answer here before his altar, and he offers himself to you fully, body, blood, soul, and divinity. Will we offer everything of us to him?